Hey, so welcome to another episode of the Soulful Side of Life with me, Portee. I hope that you're well and having a good week. And I had the privilege of chatting with Tess Quessenberry. She is a physician assistant with a background in psychiatry, addiction medicine, primary care, and aesthetics. And in this episode, we talk about her 4 habits for a smoother back to school transition. It's the time of the year where kids are going back to school, people are starting university classes, and things are going to require routine after the summer break. And Tess shares her 4 habits to help parents and their kids feel healthier, more focused, and emotionally balanced as they start a new school year. And the one takeaway that I have from my talk with Tess is how important routine is for all of us, whether we're kids or adults, because the body needs routine and rest. And there's things that we can do to have good rest and routine so that we could have good mental health. And yeah, so enjoy this podcast episode with Tess Quessenberry. Yep. Okay. So, Tess, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. You've got this really unique resume of experiences within the medical field, and it's quite diverse, like the things that you've studied from psychiatry to addiction medicine and primary care and aesthetics. What inspired that diversity of all the things you've studied?
Yeah, so I originally started off prior to even going to PA school. I started off going or working in a dermatology office. So I always thought that my passion was going to be like skincare, aesthetics. But then I moved out to California and I actually ended up getting a job with Dr. Mike Markopoulos. And he has been just the greatest supervising doc. And I had the pleasure of rounding at several different rehab facilities, detox facilities, and PHP programs. And it just opened like a whole nother perspective. So I was able to really deep dive into just the world of addiction medicine, but also just like the sociology of people and how people interact, what makes us tick, and that kind of opened up the door to psychiatry, like a little deeper understanding into psychiatry. So I like everything, and I still do some aesthetics on the side because I like being super hands-on too, but I like just all fields. And I enjoy people. I
Yeah.
enjoy conversations and the communities that people build. So that really is what has driven me to kind of have my hands in everything.
Yeah, yeah. And it makes you well-rounded because you never know, I guess. You may meet somebody that you're focusing on one area, but they've they're part of, like, another area that you have expertise in, so maybe you can understand them better.
Absolutely. And my like number one is, I like to treat when I see a patient in my clinic, I like to treat the whole person. And I think sometimes in medicine we get a little too, like in dermatology, we're only looking at dermatology issues. I mean, psychiatry, we're only looking at psychiatric things, but it's so much bigger than that. Like what's your home life like? What's
Mhm.
your social life like? What's your financial situations?
Mm.
All that plays a role in just how we feel as people, how we feel about ourselves, and what we radiate kind of back.
Exactly. Yeah, it's cool what you do. Okay, so, like, the topic of this podcast is, like, back to school.
Yeah.
And the wellness, and routine and why that's important for kids and their families. So my first question is, why is it important for kids and their parents to have a wellness routine during the school year?
Absolutely. So, routines in general, I think, are very good just for our mental health and our physical health. We kind of establish, when we establish routines, we're essentially establishing boundaries of, this is what we do at this time, this is what we do at this time. And I think it creates a feeling of safety, particularly for kids, but also adults, to know that okay, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm waking up and whatever your routine is, making coffee. Um, it kind of just develops those small but very prominent habits that are important, especially when going back to school. So, I have young kids myself, and uh, I think sometimes I get too stuck on a routine. Like, I think there's always a good medium. But, like, for instance, like, my kids still nap. And so I'm pretty stringent on at 12:30, we're reading books and we're getting ready to take a nap. And I think that really helps with their just ability to self-soothe and say,
Mhm.
"Okay, this is time to calm down and time for some quiet." Um, and they don't always sleep, but at least it's time just to like, "Okay, time to settle down, time to take a breath and like disconnect from everything." And
Right.
that's important with adults too,
Yeah.
especially like in the digital world that we're in. Um, at 7 o'clock, phones shut off or
Mm.
whatever the routine is. Everybody is different too, and you have to cater it to your family's needs and goals. Yeah, shutting down the phone or shutting off the TV or disconnecting from work, that's another big thing. So,
Yeah.
routines are very important.
Yeah, because what you just said about adults, it leads to my next question because I feel that all people need like a wellness routine, like even adults. And in the summer, we can get lax, but when the world starts moving again in September, we have to get back into the swing of things.
Abs
But I find that even as an adult, having structure routine makes for having a good next day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like for me in particular, I and again, you have to everybody is different, right? So you have to cater it almost to your strengths and abilities. So for me, I know I'm an early morning person. I'm not a night owl. So I know that if I do my best work in the morning, that I get up, before my kids get up so I can do the most important things to me get done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's absolutely important, not just for kids, but also for adults.
For sure. Um, would you say that our bodies need, a season, like, to not have a routine, like in the summertime?
Sure. I think, I feel like we always hone in on balance, which is important. But I do think sometimes we chase after this notion of balance. And I think, like you just said, it's more of seasons, right? So there's a season of life where we're going to work more. There's a season of life where we're going to have more time off. There's a season of life where your kids are going to be young and require more. And then there's a season where they need you less. But I definitely think it is important to just take time, disconnect, but always maybe keep some of your key components of a routine that help you achieve, you know, a healthy life physically and mentally. Like, so for instance, even if I'm on vacation, I do try to make it a point to work out or get some type of physical activity. And that doesn't have to look like, oh, I'm going to the gym and I'm killing myself in the gym, but maybe just like some activity, walk in, maybe play some tennis with the family. So I do think having downtime is good and needed. But to keep the key components of a routine that almost keep your sanity a little bit
Yeah,
is important too.
for sure. I'm
So,
curious, is in the body, is there certain things happening when we have a routine and when we don't? Are the organs functioning in a, different way with both?
yeah, absolutely. Like, for instance, like I see a lot of people with ADHD, right?
Mm,
So, ADHD is essentially like we're chasing after like dopamine and adrenaline. So, ADHD can be managed without medication, right? But it takes important coping mechanisms. So, for instance, like I see some maybe younger kids or teenage aged kids, and one of the big things I tell them is make a list and actually like physically check it off because that almost gives us like a little hit of dopamine that we chase after when we are so hyperactive and trying to figure out, what am I going to do and completing tasks. So, yeah, there's certainly chemical neurotransmitter components that help when we do keep to a routine. However, the body is so amazing because it likes homeostasis, right? So, whatever we do, our bodies will adapt to. So, for instance, like my husband, he works out really hard in the gym, but then he'll take like 2 days off, right? And then it's like 2 slowly turns into 3, slowly turns into 4. So
Mm.
our bodies have an impeccable way of just almost protecting ourselves. So they will adapt to what we put in front of them.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense because I don't know if you saw that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, The Revenant, and in an interview he was talking about how his character was in a very wintry, cold climate, and he
Right,
was saying the body adjusts to temperatures and harsh, that early I don't well, it wasn't settlers, but it was a time when, technology wasn't so advanced and the body adjusts to hard living.
right, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes I think we have gotten maybe because everything is. I mean, I'm like no exception here. Like if I want something delivered, like if I want groceries delivered, they're right at my door in the next hour. If I want an Amazon package or just anything. So I think we have kind of gotten out of that space of almost being uncomfortable, but our bodies do adapt. So, yeah.
We just need them to adapt to the right things, I guess, like
Exactly.
routine and order. Because
Yes.
even if a newborn baby needs routine, and I think probably people in nursing homes need routine, then we in our, adult, early adult or mid-adult life need that routine in kids as well.
Percent. And I'll tell my patients that sometimes you almost have to break it down to when you were like a baby. You know, you would wake up at a certain time, you would eat at a certain time, you would go to bed at a certain time. Like, and I think as we become early adults, that we do get further away because we have more freedoms, right? But it's important that we are able to put those boundaries in for ourselves. Absolutely.
For sure. Can you talk a little bit about your 4 habits for a smoother back to school transition with the rest, the meal prep, limiting screen time, and the immune support?
Yeah, absolutely. Rest is essential, right? So that's the very first thing. So many people nowadays struggle with sleep issues. I feel like almost every patient I see in my psychiatry clinic is not getting adequate rest. So I think that almost ties into the limiting screen time as well. We have to learn how to disconnect, turn off our phones. And again, I'm no exceptions. There's sometimes I'll be in bed and checking emails but we need to take that time. I always tell people make it a realistic goal, right? So I think sometimes we bite off more than we can chew. And some people are like, okay, I'm not going to do, phone. Last night my husband was like, yeah, I was listening to this guy. He didn't do any social media or screens for 6 months, and, that's just not realistic, right? But small goals, so, like, I can put my laptop up at 8 o'clock. I can turn my phone off at 8 o'clock, and that does allow for better rest when you are able to disconnect, when you're not getting, the artificial lights and things like that, when you're able to if work is a super stressful trigger for most people, I feel like, and just the ability to kind of turn it off is really important. So rest, limiting screen time,
The immune support
immune support, yeah.
and
So
meal prep.
and meal prep. So those 2 both go kinda hand in hand too, because I do believe that, maybe not food is medicine, but definitely looking at food more from a nourishing side as opposed to well, it can be both. It can be both, but sometimes it's hard to change habits if you have already been eating a certain way, but eating nourishing food and packed with plenty of, proteins, vitamins, and that also plays into the immune support too. Usually if you have like a healthy diet, a good routine, you're getting plenty of rest, your immune system likes that. So
Mhm.
it is going to be much easier to fight off the viral things coming our ways. I'm a huge I don't know if I don't do a ton of supplements, but I do think some supplementation is important. For my kids, I always give them like a multivitamin just because I'm sure there's some deficits in their diet here and there, but it kind of just goes back to the overall theme is if you establish a routine, it is easier to get good rest, eat good meals, and fight off all the infection that's going to be going around here as we creep into September.
For sure, for sure. I saw in an interview that somebody from Netflix said their major competitor is not another streaming service, it's sleep. And we struggle, I think, with sleep in a way that we didn't 20 plus years ago because, when you're watching a good series or movie and you like, oh, it's 2 a.m. and you have to get up at 6, it's a
Right.
killer, and, like, I suffer from migraines, and
Yeah.
I saw a neurologist, and his first question was, "When do you go to sleep? When do you wake up every day?" And
Mhm.
it's different times for me because I'm a journalist, and sometimes when I'm covering a fashion week or a film festival, I could be going to bed at 3 a.m., waking up at 8, it's different times every day, and he's like, "That's your problem," because he's like, the brain likes boringness of, like, just boring instead of, like, up and down, up and down.
Absolutely.
So, consistent sleep is key, and that's one of your 4 habits. Is it more so key for kids, like, especially during the school year?
Absolutely. I mean, think about us, right? So, as adults, like, I know if I have a terrible night's sleep, the next morning I wake up, I'm irritable. I don't want
Mhm.
anybody. So, imagine that, but almost like 10 times worse with a little kid.
Yeah.
Um, I am a huge proponent of sleep in children, primarily just because I do think there's a link between poor sleep and, mental health issues like
Mhm.
bipolar disorder, ADHD, all
Wow.
those things. So, sleep for kids is important and they do like routine. So, I know and even I deal with it now too. Like my kids will fight me on bedtime or like push me to the limit of, oh, I want to stay up one more book or one more whatever. But you have to be firm with, no, now it's time, quiet, and I try to do things in my own home to like implement like a soothing environment so it's almost easier for them to feel like at a relaxed sense. So like I never turn on like my big overhead lights. I always just, keep my windows open and it be we're like almost watching the sun go down from in our home. And I think that helps like the transition be a little smooth. I am a huge advocate for magnesium supplements. That's a big one. That has changed my sleep dramatically. I think it even comes in like lotions for kids. So sometimes I'll
Wow.
put some lotion on my kids to kind of help them transition into a more relaxed state. I have found I do a bunch of lab work, and I look at people's labs frequently and I have found most patients are deficient in magnesium. I don't know if that's just because of soil composition anymore, but magnesium supplementation has really changed the game for
A lot of
myself
people.
personally. So, yeah, so I'm a huge advocate there.
And it aids in sleep help?
Yeah, sleep and just overall, like, I think it supports, like, muscle tension too. It's funny because like, there'll be some days that I'll forget to take it or some nights, and I'll feel it, like, in my back, like, I just feel more tense.
Yeah.
So it definitely helps in muscle relaxation and just it won't make you fall asleep, right? But it just does kind of help
Good.
get into
Yeah,
that mode where it's easier to fall asleep, sure.
got
Yeah.
yeah, so Giselle Bundchen, the model, she's very like you how you were mentioning earlier about the screen time, and she doesn't allow, like, phones into her bedroom after a certain time. What are screens doing to our eyes?
So the blue light and the frequency that the screens emit, um, they they damper down our melatonin production.
Mm,
So they're really kind of wiring us to stay awake. There was one video and I won't be able to quote it specifically, but they were saying that I guess like, when they were going to create the phone, you know, the light that it emits is almost like an addictive light. Like,
mhm,
they could have chosen to do all, like, red light screens, right? But they chose to do the blue light, which is more it keeps us awake, it keeps us engaged, um, so that's really what it's doing from that sense to keep us up and why we I feel like a lot of people struggle now with sleep. Like you
mhm.
said, I don't think it was a huge issue until recently, the
No,
development of
no.
technology. I mean, a TV in every room, most of us work from a computer, and then we have our phone. So it's like just constant, it never shuts off.
Yeah.
Um,
I miss the days of being a kid and going to Blockbuster, and you had one TV in the living room, and but those were special nights, ordering pizza and going to Blockbuster, and we were happy and content. All of this streaming, I think it in addition to the screen and what it's doing to the body or lack of sleep, I think it's creating loneliness because we're all in
absolutely.
these apps in our phones and our own rooms with our own TVs, and there's a loss of community.
Absolutely. I think you hit on a really important thing there, the community piece, which I try to tell a lot of my patients. It goes back to like looking at the person as a whole, but community is so undervalued. And it is so important, right? And it's funny that you're talking about Blockbuster because I today I went this morning I went on a walk and there's a theater by me and it's shut down and I was walking with my mom and I was like I can't believe that theater has shut down. Like, to me, it seems like it would be such a good place to go. It's right here in a walkable neighborhood. And she was like, "Yeah, but think about it. Who goes to the movies anymore? We all just stream it on our laptop and our TV." And I was like, "I guess we really do. That is so sad. Like even getting out to go to the movies to be in community with others,
Yeah,
nobody does anymore." But
yeah.
the community is you hit on a really good topic there, just being in community with others, and I feel like that has become so undervalued. Really being with people in person,
Mhm.
it's essential to our health. It's another, like, pillar to good mental health and physical health.
Yeah, for sure. Um Yeah, it's crazy how we've just become very individualistic. And I heard a podcast interview that Scooter Braun did. He's Justin
Mm,
Bieber's former manager. And he
yeah.
was saying that he believes with the rise of AI, it's going to bring community back and experiences back because a lot of people are going to be out of jobs,
Mm,
and that it's going to bring people together in unique
mhm.
ways. I don't know,
I
but
guess we will see. I am a firm believer that the pendulum always swings.
yeah, I
So,
agree.
I do think, we had COVID and nobody was together. I think we are due to swing the other way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. A couple of last questions. Your one of your pillars is the immune support, and like, it just you can be at Walmart or at the vitamin shop, and you're like, "I don't know which vitamins to buy." It can feel, like, overwhelming sometimes, and, I interviewed, a woman who's big into health and wellness and supplements holistic health, and she advised to get, like, a blood test and have your physician tell you what deficiencies you have instead of going and buying 20 different vitamins. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the thing with supplements, they're great, right? But I do tell my patients, specifically like with my psychiatric patients and addiction medicine clients, that a lot of supplementations can have interactions with certain psychiatric and addiction medicine
Mhm.
medication. So it is super important to have a thorough evaluation, have a conversation with your provider. Um, I'm curious, was it a functional medicine provider? Do you know if she was a functional medicine?
No,
Yeah.
she does this as her own kind of self-passion interest, very
Got
just healthy in her own thing.
Oh
She's not
my
a
okay.
physician.
Very cool. Well, I do think that getting lab work is super important to see where your levels are and then supplement accordingly, because I do think that with a lot of the supplement companies, none of that is run by like the FDA at all.
Mm.
So you're really getting just you could get just random random things and it not be third party tested. So I always recommend like a reputable brand who does do third party testing or some other form of testing, because the supplement company or the supplement industry is not regulated by the FDA.
I
So
see.
I
Should
do
we
think it's
be calling our doctors though every time, say we're on scrolling through a YouTube short and they're like, "Oh, you need to get this multivitamin or get creatine," or should we be calling our doctor every time like, "Doctor, can I take creatine? Can I take this?"
um So I think that's another thing with like the social media and just overall mental health and well-being. There is so much overconsumption of what's the best diet, what's the best supplement. And here's the thing, we're all going to have different opinions on what works for like but what works for me might not work for you because we're
Right.
different. We have a different genetic makeup. So, I don't know if calling your doctor every time per se, but maybe once a year getting a really thorough like evaluation of, okay, I want to know what's happening in my body. Can I please get, thorough blood work done? I think for men and women, even just hormones are super I mean, that contributes to almost everything. Our
Mhm.
mood, our motivation,
Or
so getting
weight balance,
yes,
yeah.
right, absolutely. So, I think once a year, if you have a good relationship and a good primary care, I think it's important to have those conversations like, "Look, I want something really thorough because I wanna be living, like, the best that I can, so I
Mhm.
wanna know everything that's going on." And usually if you have a good provider, they're like, "Yes, I want the same for you."
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
and you recommend just, like, taking a good multivitamin for just about everyone or
Yeah, I do. I do think a good multivitamin, I think is just a standard, like, again, just to hit like the nutrient gaps that we might have. I mean, look, we're not perfect people, right? Like, I can't every morning get up and make an omelet with all these vegetables and then for lunch eat a kale salad. And I guess I could, but
Yeah, yeah.
it takes a lot of prep, and we're not gonna hit that maybe every time. I do think a good multivitamin hits a lot of maybe nutritional gaps that we might have. Again, I'm a big proponent for magnesium for sleep. I think everybody could use magnesium. And maybe the last one that I see, just because I see it a lot in my practice with almost everybody, is vitamin D deficiency.
Mm,
But again, I think it almost ties back to the screens and the work, and
mhm,
none of us are outside anymore. So I could say I see probably 80% of my patients that I see in office that I do lab work on are deficient in vitamin D.
mm.
Those are kind of my three core, the multi magnesium for sleep and vitamin D.
It's interesting in France when you get vitamin D, that you have to get it at the pharmacy, this is my experience when I lived there, and you get it behind the counter, and then they give it to you in a liquid vial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I find that interesting there.
Yeah, liquid is gonna be better absorption,
Okay.
so they're probably doing it right over
Okay.
there.
Got it.
Yeah, you could get different formulations, and again, that kinda goes back to patient preference and, everybody's an individual, so, like, for my kids, like, they're not gonna swallow a pill, so liquid is definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then you don't take it every day, like the liquid, it's like you take
Mhm.
it every 6 months or something, or
Oh,
3
wow,
months
okay.
or something like that, and then
Yeah,
it had the what you said, the variations, or I forget, the IUI or
the I
whatever.
use uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, so it wasn't something that you take every day. Yeah.
There are different formulations for sure. So depending on how deficient someone is, could maybe and I think one of the few for or if someone is truly, truly deficient, I can put them on like a weekly dose where they just take one capsule a week. But again, it kind of goes back to your labs. How deficient are you? Are you borderline? I still do think that even if you are within range, I do think that just a daily vitamin D is helpful.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, 2 last questions. Like, for the podcast, I like to ask questions about, like, character and calling, and when did you know that you were called to be a doctor, and what's the character that's needed to sustain that calling?
Hmm. When did I know I was called? I'm not quite sure. I don't know if there was ever like a pivotal moment. I think it was just like it just kind of happen naturally. Again, I kind of just I guess it goes back to like what I find what is my greater purpose in life in general, right? So, in my opinion, my greater purpose is to serve others. And I myself have always been passionate about just health and wellness. And then when I had kids, that like multiplied 20-fold because then I'm worried about their health and wellness and what we're doing as a family. So I think it just kind of gradually happened. And I think the biggest character to sustain that is patience.
Mm,
Having patience with people, especially in the psychiatric and addiction medicine field, um, being able to be patient and meet people where they're at. You know,
yeah,
not everybody is going to want to do things how you want to do them, and that's okay. You have to meet them where they're at and help from there. So,
got it.
yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
your expertise and knowledge.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode and that you have found a soulful connection to the conversation. God bless you, and until the next episode, go bless somebody else.